Good evening, everyone. Okay, we are live. All right, good evening, everyone. If you are live with us, please say hi. Callie is sharing as usual, but we have our show tonight on a topic that no one seems to ever really want to talk about, but it is so many of us experience it, or that it resonates with us. And we're going to be talking about Niam Yau today and just kind of that experience. And so Callie and I are both from a Niam Yau family, and so is our next guest. And so this will be a really interesting conversation, and we'll kind of share more about the dynamics of our families. Um, and I think Callie and I have always been a big like open book where when you guys ask us things, we just kind of share what we are feeling, and what we're thinking. And so many of you probably don't know this part of us and our stories of our families and kind of the dynamics of that. And so we'll be sharing and having a conversation about that. So I hope that you guys please help us share this. Engage with us as well. This is us sharing a little bit of who we are with all of you. And so if it resonates with you, let us know. If you grew up with a different experience, DM us and let us know, or put it in the comments if you want others to read it as well, and engage with us in the conversation. I think this is really important. Many of us kind of grew up and and especially in the US, right? Because that's not really something that Miga people talk about. And so when you talk about it, and I'm also curious, like, how did other people talk about it? Because growing up, I would always be like, oh, that's my stepmom. But people are always like, well, what about your mom? And as a child, it's hard to kind of explain that. So anyway, we'll be talking about all of that good stuff today. So um, if you're live, say hi. Let us know where you're watching us from. Help share this. We want to make sure that this is, something that hopefully starts the conversation between a lot of people. We see it so much, but we don't talk about it enough, from the different lens that that we want to talk about it from. And so, we'll kind of share a little bit more about um, our moms and our dads and our relationships with our siblings, relationships with our families and our community, and just kind of the stigma that comes along with coming from a family of Nihlani Yao. So it should be pretty interesting. We've got, hi, my cow. Thank you so much for tuning in. Oh, she says that her dad had 3 wives. My mom is the first mom. Yeah. Uh, yeah, they have 3 wives too. Again, that's not anything that's not normal within our community. But sometimes I think there's a lot of stuff that happens between each of the wives and the families, and there's just so much to unpack, but we don't really talk about that kind of stuff. And I know that the first step is to just kind of be vulnerable. And so that's Callie and I and our guests. That's what we're doing tonight, is just being vulnerable and kind of sharing our thoughts and our experiences with having Nehlani Yao, and how was it like growing up for us, and some of that. So should be interesting. Hi, August. How are you? Thank you so much for tuning in. Jennifer shared that her dad had 4 wives. Yes. Okay. So I don't know anyone who's had 4 wives, but I do know of 3. So that's really interesting though. I wonder what is the biggest number. Maybe when Ty comes on, we can ask him of what number has he seen of a man having multiple wives. Like, what's the highest number he's seen? And this could probably date back to like right after the war, that when women are husbandless because their husband has died, and other men who come back just kind of take on. But it'll be kind of interesting to hear it from him too on that. So Sam Lee says, I have seen 6. That's quite a bit. Can you imagine? I mean, as women, I would just think like, goodness, I'm so much already. Imagine like 5 more of me to handle. My husband would die.
Sweet. And thank you to I'm gonna mispronounce. It's Zhong Amy Zhong for sending stars. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
yes. Thank you, Amy. Shang Yang says, I wouldn't mind being in a multiple wife relationship.
Oh, really?
I think, yeah, come on. I mean, I don't know. Shane, maybe one day we'll have you come on and kind of talk to us about that. Who knows?
Please tell us why. I'm curious why.
Yeah.
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 Everyone
Hi,
can
Bobby.
contribute to the relationship. That's very true, but the drama, I think that's the base. So my
I'm just gonna say gulu so.
yeah,
Yeah, it's me.
my
12
my
wives?
Ria
Oh
said
my
my grandpa had
goodness.
12 wives. Safe to say my family is huge. Yes.
Wow.
Sam said, "Was she single?" Sam, you better chill, okay? You
For
saw how
real.
cute your wife was this weekend, so you need to relax.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, before we kind of bring Ty on, I think we had a couple of comments in our post that Callie and I would kind of like to share. But obviously, it's just a lot. We know that this topic, again, resonates with a lot of people because just right now there's so many of you commenting how many that your dad had, or that you're a part of a family, or that someone you knew. And so I think this is just really important for us to, again, just start the conversation. I know that it impacts us all very, very different, and as you'll see in a second, we can all, the three of us, will kind of share just the um kind of like the structure of our family and the dynamics of that. So, and we've got a couple comments that people had commented in our last post introducing Ty, and we just kind of want to share that. Just know that you are not alone, and we know that we're not alone. So we know that this is a topic that definitely resonates with a lot of people. But we had, is it Gambo? How do you pronounce that, Kelly?
Said,
Yeah,
yeah.
Gambo. Yeah. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. And this person wrote, my grandpa had 3 wives, and my dad promised his mom, who was the first wife, that he would never marry more than one wife. My dad always told us that it is the children who end up suffering a lot when a man marries multiple wives, and he never wanted us to experience that. And I think we can agree to that to a certain extent for most people. So,
Yes.
you want to read the next one, Kelly?
Yep. So the next comment is from Kua Zhang, and she said, my adopted father had 3 wives, and I grew up with 2 of the wives in the same household. My birth father had 2 wives, and most of my uncles has 2 wives as well. Growing up, my mom had a good relationship. When my father passed, my moms had each other and both loved each
Mhm.
other a lot. Both moms loved me equally, and my dad was a great father. Was he a great husband? No, he had his favorite. At times, I could see one of the moms being hurt or jealous, but they always kept their sister wives' relationship close. Personally, I would never live this lifestyle and not hope this to anyone else. I can never handle what they've been through. It's tough. That's amazing that your moms had a good relationship. I think that shows the maturity and just understanding of what that what that relationship represented. So it's interesting.
Yeah. All right, so this next one is by Chia Yang, and it states, I grew up with my dad having 2 wives, and I don't know other people, but I despise the idea. Just seeing the hurt and pain that my mom went through and is still going through makes my heart hurt for her. I also despise the other women, because why would you hurt another woman for your own benefit? I never associate myself with the other woman and keep my distance because she's nobody to me. I only have one mom, and that's all I need. Yes, it's the man's fault too, but if women just learn to have love and feel the other women, we wouldn't have this problem. In order to fix this problem and break this cultural norm, women need to be the start to make that change. I can certainly see it from that perspective as well. Again, like there's so much for us to unpack, and we won't be able to do it in this short, like 50 minutes that we're going to be talking about. But again, we know that this is the beginning of a topic that we do want to explore more about, because it does have a lot to do with just like relationship overall, right? And I think, Chia, you make a really good point about um you know women, starting with us, in this day and age. I think it's going to be very different when we unpack it back then for our parents and our great grandparents. But it definitely is a different time now, and we can definitely unpack that.
Yep. And then just want to give a shout out to Sam for sending 200 stars. So thank you,
Thank
Sam.
you, Sam.
And so we have, this name is spelled backwards. Something Lee.
Sylvia.
So
Sylvia. Sylvia
Sylvia.
Lee.
Okay. Sylvia Lee said, "Times have changed. It's time for women to have two husbands now. Hashtag 2022." Laughing my ass off. That is true. I think that there are women that, would, I think has kind of turned that narrative around, right? And said, we should be able to have two husbands too. I personally do not want all that headache,
Yeah.
but to each her own.
Yes, for sure. Okay. Um, last comment, which, oh man, I think this really agree equal percent for this comment because ourselves we forget to acknowledge. But Thu Psycho Lee says Nian Da never gets acknowledgement. And yes, I think there are lots of our aunties or our moms or women, Hmong women out there who are the Nian Da and Nian Mei and Nian whatever follows. That sometimes they don't get acknowledged because there are so many that it's really like the first or and the last one that people know, or the first and the second. So we do agree with that, and I don't know if we'll have time to kind of even unpack so much of that, but man, I just think this topic, we can go on for days talking about different things. And so thank you guys so much for those comments. It means a lot to us. It makes us feel a lot, knowing like a certain way, knowing that we're not the only ones who experience Niam Yau and Dan and May growing up. There are many of our Hmong brothers and sisters around our age that experience that too. And so with that, I will pass it over to Callie, and hopefully we can bring on our guests and get started.
Yep. And just a quick comment about the Nianja. It's kind of like the middle child, right? Sometimes you do tend to get forgotten as a middle child. And so I think very similar concept. All right. So our guest that is coming on with us, that we are very grateful for, that he is willing to talk about his experience, because I think it is important to just be able to talk and relate and feel so not alone, right? Because I think we, as a lot of us probably grew up just, this was the way it is, right? And so I think that a lot of the stuff that we have to deal with, and are continuing to deal with, are things that we just grew up and knew as is. And so our guest is Tai Zhang from the Midwest, and his father has two wives too. And so he is going to be joining us in this conversation, talking about that experience growing up.
Hey, Tai. Thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about this and sharing your experience with Callie and I and the rest of our Hmong community.
No problem. Thank you for inviting, and I saw the post and I want to be a part of it. So
yeah, thank you for that. For just, again, like I said earlier, it's like being vulnerable. And I think topic, Nolly. So I think if I may be mistaken, but I think that we three are going to be the first ones to kind of tackle this topic of Niam Yau and kind of just share our experience. But we'll kind of just kick it off, and Tai will kind of let you share your piece of it first, and then Callie and I can kind of go into it. But the first question really is just to share a little backstory of where you were born, whether your mom was Niam Hlob or Niam Yau, and how old you were when all of this happened, whether it happened overseas or here in the United States. Right. And then, once you're done, Callie and I can kind of go into sharing our stories. But before you start, I do want to just put a quick disclaimer out there that these are our personal feelings, our individual stories, our own experience of Niam Yau. And by no means are we saying this is right or this is wrong. This is just us sharing and having a conversation about all of that. Okay, so just so people know.
Thank you. Cú lúc bây giờ Thái Xiong cú yêu nhớ trò tới chờ vi này. Cú nhà thế cú chỉ là lò vi này sẽ chờ chua chỉ cú I was born in shortly after. Cú nhớ vi này trong cú nhà cú chỉ tao yêu lo cầu xong là chua xong là chỉ cú chỉ yêu Niam Yau. Chỉ cú nhớ cá mà bé cú bé Niam Yau lần đó bé nhớ tao li ó xong sẽ chỉ bé tua tới chờ mi cả nó là. Chỉ thầu bé tua nó chỉ cụ chỉ quan tâm đến cho cụ nhà chỉ cụ chính đó cụ thế cụ tụi lao bây giờ tua là cho nhà giàu bây nhà giàu cho này cho tu thiên này chọn xài là tua là thế chỉ bây thầu bây tua này chỉ bây tua nhà là thì chỉ thầu tua cho tới chơi Mica nó là chỉ và bây tua Minnesota chỉ cụ bây nhà giàu là tua California chỉ thầu tua cho là nó chỉ cụ chỉ bài back and forth sao到意向那种意向到的结果啊，估计天里我学木到被你要弄到被鸟被那就被人家被只要我给地路这的是嘛，被人家地路上 until 我被你要写了要的估计写，so
Yeah. All right, Callie, and how about you? What's your story?
So my parents, when I was born, because I am the second youngest in the whole family, like across like Niam Hlob. And so I was born, and then this just the way it was, right? Like, and so I was 5 when we came here, and then baby we got to California, and we live in different house or apartments then, and I think my dad did go back and forth. And then we moved to North Carolina when I was after 4th grade. And then after that, we all pretty much like lived together and grew up together. I have a brother that's my age. And so that was always kind of awkward growing up. Like I remember like people would just ask, right? Because that's my brother, but it's not like my blood brother, but we do live together. So it's almost like we, like it's almost like I don't have to explain too much, but I know that, that it was definitely a little bit different. And my mom is Niam Yau.
Callie, did you ever like say that you guys were twins?
I didn't, but I would say I would just say stepbrothers. And then that's when people would be like, so like is because I think stepbrothers and half brothers, right? Are like the moms or the dad or something like that. And so I remember always saying that they're my stepbrothers, but I think they're actually considered like half. But then so that was the only thing. And then you did you both here, so you let the 10. So I think I confused people. They were probably like, what in the world? And then they were just like, okay, whatever, But I mean, like in 5th grade, we had two different 5th grade teachers. But then we went to high school and, I mean, just kind of let the light explain, and then I think people were just like,
Yeah.
Goli, I think you mentioned half brother Mika, the half brother, like half sister. I don't even think there is a word for Hmong. And as you were saying that, I was just thinking about kutu cứ na, vì họ tên là bên Hmong mà giờ này giao du là những kutu cứ là những kutu mua thì mà cũng sản là bên Hmong là chỉ giờ thọ con nông tua là nó chỉ hạt ya kutu cứ mà công chí thì chỉ công nia, right? Họ thì ưa mình công tí tự chí thì chỉ những món nia nó là ya. So I think as Scott explaining that made me think of my half brother, and I think that will be the best joke to describe hạt ya ya cứ tí công chí thì chỉ công nia.
Yeah. So all my brothers, I think, are considered half, even though I just like you did both steps in I always just grew up saying that's my stepbrothers, but
yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so my story, so my dad passed away when I was like 5, and then my mom remarried my dad's younger cousin. I don't know if it's necessarily like, what do they call it? I don't think it's that. I don't know, because I feel like and maybe it is, I don't know. Like my dad did like come over and like talk to my mom and go ying talk. I mean, she was like wanting to marry other people, but I think right, because my dad passed away. So I think at the end, then stepdads, yeah, right. And so my mom is the second mom, and God, life has not been easy. I think out of the 3 of us, I may have the most difficult story, or the dynamics are just so much tension. But I have, so sibling wise, I still have to think because there's so many, from my my biological dad, I have 2 older sisters and an older brother. So gong ji chi gong nia. And then with my dad, my biological dad, I have 1 brother. And then after my mom had me, my dad passed, and then my mom married my stepdad, and she had a daughter and a son. So then I have 1 brother and sister younger than me, gong nia chi gong si, right? And I think you're so right. Like there's no, but I think when people ask me like how many siblings do you have, I don't usually say I have, like 3 half sisters and 2 half brothers and a blood brother. I never say that unless we're talking in this sense or people start asking lots of questions. I usually just say I have this amount of sisters and this amount of brothers. And then with my step family, good Lord, I lose track of how many there are. I think my stepmom had like 12 or 13 kids. And I think 7 of them are 7 or 8. I have to like remember their names, but there's a lot of them. And then she had 4 girls. So I do have a really big family, but I'm not as close to them as I wish we could be. Yeah.
You guys live together in the same household?
Yeah, so we did. And I think that's kind of what maybe started the tension. I know in our pre-talk I kind of shared this, but my mom, at first when they married, I remembered I was like in the 1st grade, and we lived with him up until like mid 2nd grade. And then I think it was or maybe it was 2 years. I don't know. Like we lived with them for a certain amount of time, because I did remember like going to school with my sisters and my stepsisters and my stepbrothers. And then we moved to live in an apartment by ourselves. And then my stepdad has just been kind of traveling back and forth every other night until he passed this year. So.
Got it. And how much older is your stepdad to your mom? Because she married the younger or
Yeah. So my dad, they just give you whatever birth date that they think you are, right? So according to what is on paper, my dad is 30 years older than my mom. So my mom had me when she was 30. Because she had first married her husband, and then her husband passed away in the war, and then she went back to live with her family, and then my dad came to marry her and had my brother and I. And then I don't know how old my stepdad is, unfortunately, but I know that my dad was a lot older than my mom according to what's on paper.
Yeah. Because that's a distinction too, right? Or like just to the relationship of like how old like your dad is to you and stuff. All right. So our next question is, what were some of the reasons that people married multiple wives back in the day? And Ty, we're gonna let you lead this one. But some of those reasons could also be reasons why people get do that.
Yeah.
Today.
So for cú nó chế và trở lại cú tao thiết trở lại cú cho cái son rùa cho cú tu kinh thế này. Back in the days nó mà bên mong cho chính nên nhiều và tao ở tu bao nhiêu vì đó khó giờ thì ta có hay à Olivia. Giờ thầuอยู่ตัวที่เราไม่ตัวปนเนี่ยอยู่ตัวที่เราเสียเลยgiờ thì là chỉ mớiอยู่ตัวที่เราchỉ đâuอยู่nó chếอยู่ตัวเนี่ยที่อยู่มืออยู่นั่งอยู่มืออยู่chỉ chia chếเลยมืออยู่cho mìnhอยู่thế làมืออยู่là li nhiêu là li nó chế nhớ là học bé mong nó chế ya to keepตัวเนี่ยที่thế cho mìnhอยู่thế cho chia cho cho học bé chế năng mong xong for example nó chế bây giờ chủ động muaตัวเนี่ยที่là chỉ tu cứ là ya chỉ tuที่เรา right? So that's one of the reasons. Another reason chị giờ li butani hai lucy hơn đó nó chị phải cho chị năng nhiên mù cho là ya chị mua cho con nhà sang ở bên trong nó đau chị và as a result of that cho chị năng mỗi hai lần nó chị bên nhà chính chống cha chị năng lực nó là mà thì ít khó và bây giờ chỉ nên và tại sao nó cũng bảo it's more tại sao nó it's not so much in the day it's a year ta cũng đang ngồi thả I think 比较只能为了好的被莫做ใจto you out 不年啊，จะ被 you out 做กินชอบ right แล้วยาเดีย做กินชอบเล่ายาลีเดียกูมุดไทยตัวลงก็กูตัวมัวปนเนี่ยเลยที่ชิกูจะมุดไทยตัวลงก็นะจะกูตัวลงก็มัวมีอยู่เลยจะทำมัวมีอยู่ในเป็นมองในเป็นจุอยู่อ่ะใช่ไหม被chỉ被伊的药了被考是啊，就是嘛要他们没药了，没药要都要不读了，那就古因收药了是，古因技术考了天，and so those are three things that I could think of. 古今朝该考了的是你看到古啥些啊？看的好要好对。
I think a thing. I don't remember, but I think it kind of goes back to, I don't know if you mentioned it, but like back in the day, the wartime. I think you've already mentioned that, right? Like I know that this is one of the primary reasons I've heard a lot from just talking to my uncles or about like back then why right? Because a lot of women, they are husbandless. Their husband don't come back from the war because they've been captured and have been killed, or whatever the reason may be. And so like one of my uncles said, you bỏ they mean you lỡ ý lỡ or chị tàu lên tàu tê and you lose lỡ chị you move you lỡ lỡ tu lỡ they mean you here lỡ losing it, right? So I think in that sense, when I look at it from that lens, I understand. But only to be one of those women. So I never really understand, but I do understand from my uncle's perspective of why, because you looked at there were so many different things that are at play versus where we are now.
I remember the other reason, as you explained, is that the big mong na biya big mong na man mika who the patrilineage, right? You have the big saga big Jamino carry big zilu lumbe na je. Sometimes be your day to pony on a much out to me or do or pena, je betally sato to ne yao la you do, right? La ya dia how much out to non dao the she how she much down side and yes sato to ne yao la yun side here. So that's the other reason that I just went blank, but as you explained that it came back to me. So
yeah,
I've heard that like there and I don't know if you said this, Ty, but like that, when you if your wife is pregnant and then you might need help on the farm, like that's what I've heard too, but I don't know if that's
that could be too. Vì đó họ thì bên mong mà thì mà bên ở tây nào thế này bây giờ chỉ giờ thì cũng tụi bọn họ so lại nữa họ bắt tao được cũ giờ thì cũng đang được thả nữa họ cả thiên là giờ lý Olivia hay mua cho bọn đó chỉ trông thế nào chỉ giờ tụi bọn họ cả nó là dùng lo cho là lúa ấy cho là đó dùng ở tây nào có sẽ được tao nó tao hậu ở nên là thiên lý chỉ cho nhẹ nó sẽ là I'm sure that contribute to it as well.
Yeah. And so these reasons are by no means to justify how everyone feels. These are just reasons that we were trying to figure out, like how it started. And so again, I think that everyone's feelings are valid, but these are just kind of the reasons that we found.
Yeah. And I just want to state to you, I know that when Ty had shared about the whole marriage thing, like in the back of my mind, I think now, our mindset now in the society that we live in now, we're like, well, the men carry the gene. They're the one. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I used to think this way too when I was younger, right? As you grow older, you grow wiser, and you learn to just kind of understand and forgive. But I think we also have to think back to, what they study, right? They're not educated. They don't know what we know now. And so back then it was more of like, it's just the women's fault. Like, you or whoever, right? And so I don't want us to like get angry, but more so try to understand from that, from that lens back then, because we are really uneducated in that field back then. And so just trying to put ourselves through people who did make that decision based on that.
And I think Ikha is that the culture itself is really dynamic.
Yeah.
For big Mona, right? And Lucia Handa mà chỉ nên yên mua power cha là yên mua chạy cha ya giờ
Yeah.
tụi con nhà yo là lo là yên và nhà nhà cả tụi con nhà cho yo xin à but lo rồi ta chỉ nó chỉ it's it's a date how na and
Yeah.
you are absolutely right Olivia on that point.
Yeah. Okay, so let's kind of go into kind of like what was it like growing up for all of us? You know, I think we kind of already answered the fact that if like we all lived together, but what was that experience like growing up, whether you are living together or in separate houses, and kind of what that dynamic looks like?
Yeah, for cho cú nè, cú chỉ có nhiều cú nhà cái rồi cú tu mua li cho xong cho cậu xong đó, chỉ thọ bên nhiều lò nó chỉ bên nhiều cho lấy cú ít tu sister là do ít tu mua, thì chỉ tu mua nó mà yêu tỏ chế không ya nữa mà chỉ mà cho lò học bên chế á, chỉ riêng lấy riêng cho bên cho tu mua nữa là ở bên tu mua kia là lúc last này thế giờ mi cái để tròn cha mà do hoàn thành không ya, thì chỉ mà lò học không xong lúc chế chỉ riêng là không xong tuần sai rồi chỉ even nên lúc này nó là thằng nó mới chỉ là bây giờ mong cho như tụ khoa sao thì mong cho như tụ yếu khó và nhiều và qua tuần sai đó cho nên chỉ bên này lần đó bên nhau tới Indo thì bên này mới tụ chỉ giao cụ tụ half brother là mình cả hai là thì chỉ tao cụ mà nếu giao cụ tụ cứ sao cụ chỉ hai thì half brother là cha thì chỉ thầu thả mua lớn nó chỉ mà thải thì because some people they oh có hai tiền này cứ tỷ thì xin này thì chỉ cho trong ý à này là này bây giờ thằng đấy cái mà thì ya công ty thì chỉ chỉ công nhà thì bây giờ nhau ok á thằng bây giờ nhau lại bây giờ nhau ok nhau until bây tuổi tới chuẩn bị cả này thì bây mà nhiều một nhiều là cũng nhiều theo cũng chỉ bây tuổi ok thì bây giờ nhau theo này cho tụi mòn rồi theo cho chừng mỗi cho đi lâu tao không ra thế đó lại tua lại đó là California là chỉ tua lại tua đông đá biết tua đâu bên nó chỉ tua tao ý nhân đu li ý xong đâu nữa nó chỉ cũng chỉ mà một tàu bên này nhau lần đó bên nó chỉ thầu nhau hàng đông đỡ mà cũng chỉ vô cũng nhiều sao cũng chỉ một này nhau á chỉ lại lo cho bên nó chỉ lại lo nhỏ lại lo sau chỉ lo chỉ lại nhỏ lại thì chỉ lại nhỏ chỉ đến được bé theo nhỏ vào đi cầu mà thì sẽ chỉ bé nhỏ bé chỉ cũng chỉ ở nhà đi và có hai Olivia cũng chỉ riêng một nhỏ tỏ EV chỉ mỗi hai chân để cũng cho và đi lâu thế cho cứ thế cho muộn để bên này nhau nó chỉ cho đi lâu và là chỉ mong ya nè chỉ bây giờ xí luôn nè muốn nào là bây giờ xí hú bây giờ và bây giờ chỉ hay họ lấy nhiều là và bây nhiều là chỉ lấy những bây tụi đi lâu là lấy những bây tụi cứ là bây giờ chui lên đó chỉ bây giờ chỉ mua cái sinh du họ cũng tụi mua là bây giờ cũng những sinh du của tụi mua họ cũng tụi cứ là cũng những chỉ và cũng những sinh du của tụi cứ bây giờ the only thing is that bây tôi nhớ tới channel gì bây chỉ nhớ ok thế nào chỉ lỡ và lỡ on lỡ sát họ cũng chỉ cũng lo on cũng sát họ cũng cho tí lâu để cũng chỉ kia là để cũng cho ba lá chục brother là thứ và lo ta là thứ một là nên ta là chỉ lúc xưa nó chỉ chủ yếu cũng chỉ thiết cũng nhẹ thiết cũng tí lâu kia thiết cũng sao chỉ biết lâu lần sao để cũng nhẹ và ya tụ nhẹ lo chỉ để nhẹ nhau nó chỉ ya tụ mùa thiết tụ cứ đó chuyển cho và cho tí lâu thế thì mà thế cho mùa thế thì mà là thứ mùa gió là chỉ thế là thứ một là nên ta là chỉ nhưng mà hay là chỉ bên chỉ cho nhau ok thì chỉ mình hay cho cái xí lưu chỉ bên những xí lưu nhà mong thì sao những xí lưu ok giờ là ít chuyện nên kia là giao thì chỉ nhau ok sao.
Yeah. Kelly, how about you?
So we all grew up together, and so my experience, because I'm the only girl, I feel like is a little bit different, and like I didn't even think about this until I, like am older. But I don't know. I think I would probably had a really bad experience if I was had a sister, because I feel like the comparison, right? So you won't probably compare because I was one lazy girl growing up. I wasn't, I was never, I always saw that how my family treated my brothers. And I always felt like, well, I want to do what they, right? Like, I want to go play soccer. I don't want to stay back and help my mom do stuff, or I want to, go and do what my brothers did, right? I didn't want to like, and stuff like that. And so, and I think because I had so many brothers and they were, like super athletic, like I think I view that a little bit different. So I don't know if my brothers ever felt like, like especially they're competitive in sports. And, I mean, I think we all knew who was like the best soccer player, and we knew who the best volleyball player was, but like, I don't know if like the experience is different. But I think for me, like sometimes being the only girl, it's like I'm in my own world too. And so you Paul she key on, like just if you're like the favorite because you're the better at soccer or volleyball and stuff like that. But it was definitely like there was definitely, I would say tension sometimes. I think I feel like my dad was pretty equal in how he treated us because my dad also had Niam Yau, and my dad's mom is Niam Yau. So I feel like in some ways my dad did try to be equal, but again, that's from like my lens and with six other two, so I don't have that experience of feeling that, right? Like if it doesn't pertain to me as a girl, thì cũng chỉ cho nó này giờ, khó tính mình chứ nào. So but I think for the most part, my dad is very like, like I don't want to say but like my dad ruled the house basically, right? And so it's just like my dad is the last word, and so if both my moms like my dad will just snip it, right? And then it's just like whatever he says goes, and everybody pretty much and so I think in that way, there was less problems, and I think for the most part, my dad is very new what and so I think we all just grew up to like respect my dad, and so I think that for the most part I felt like it was as fair as it could be, of course, because my mom is Niam Yau too. My lens is different, right? And so I mean, I guess in a way I can probably say that my dad probably like favored my mom, but I think sometimes my mom also puts up with my dad too, and so it's just like the patience that my mom has is just incredible, and so I think that allows some things to work too, right? And so so I think that that's kind of how we kind of dealt with stuff, and I mean I think growing up, I mean, we knew who was like Nihlo and Ayal's kids, right? But I mean, I think because we all grew up together too, and like all the siblings are pretty close in age. It's pretty much like it's almost like almost every like year, right? And so like they're that much older than we are, right? It's basically like they have the oldest, and then I think it's ours, theirs, ours, theirs. So and again, I have a brother that's like my age, that's the youngest on their side, and I'm the second youngest on our side. And so they and she like pretty close in age together too. And so it did feel very much like we're just all one family growing up.
Yeah.
How about you?
I love what you pointed out, Kelly. I think that makes all the difference when your dad puts his foot down and really says, you guys need to squash whatever stuff you got going on. Because I felt like that didn't really happen in my family. So the dynamic's a little different. So we did grow up living together. And honestly, like I remember it was so much fun because I just had all these new siblings and kids I can play with, and we would play. And I remember my older brother got injured quite a bit because he's top boy and but that's because we had all these siblings that we are now a part of. And I just remember we had so much fun growing up, and I don't know at what point things shifted to where there was just so much like bitterness and tension and hate in my family. But I grew up having really good memories with my step siblings, because I was the baby, like my dad passed, and my mom loved me a lot. She always tells this like really embarrassing story of me to people. It's so embarrassing, but at the same time, I think that was just my way of like coping with the trauma of my dad passing, right? Because he was such a big part of my life. And then all of a sudden he was gone, So I think she was the only thing I had. And so I was holding on to everything and not wanting to let go. But I remember just gaining so many new siblings and having so much fun. But of course, 頭要仲要有嘅要自己煲嚟進行流數，有冇幾時期些嘢嘅
Right.
right? So then we moved away, and I never understood why. Because again, I was like in this first and second grade, and I'm like, but why are we moving away? Now I got to go make completely new friends, and I have my sisters and them here. And so I don't know, it was just very different. And then kind of coming into like um as you grow older, right? So like middle school to high school ish, and I think even throughout like my very first few years, oh my gosh, my first few years of college, there was just so much like things I didn't understand. Like a lot of negative things said to my mom. I only see it from my lens. I don't know what my mom could have done things, said things that I was too young to understand to them, and it could have triggered. I have no idea, right? But I'm only seeing the things that are being said and done to her. Um, and of course, my stepdad wasn't one to like be like, you can't do that. Don't treat your stepmom that way to his kids or to us or anyone. And so it was just all kind of like this like secret, I don't know, thing that happens where like so then you just keep this anger. And it wasn't until like, God, I would say like maybe 10 years ago where I'm just like, you know what? I don't care. Because you 已經係你要去 but you can K you ball like you're triggered by it too. So there's like that trauma I have to work through as well. And so I just feel like my relationship with my step family isn't as great, but I also do it's almost like a blessing in disguise, because then it brings me this much closer to like my siblings, where my older siblings from my dad, my biological dad, and my younger siblings from my mom. And so when there is tension, then it kind of brings this like of like we have to love each other, because we don't want to end up hating each other, like this feeling we have. And so it just makes me appreciate like the love that I do have for my siblings. Um, regardless of what my relationship is with my step family, it makes me love my siblings that much more, because you both you on that, right? Right? So like
Right.
my little brother and sister, like they are half to my step siblings, but they don't they don't love my little brother and sister like I do. So I know that like if I don't love them, no one will. And so it just makes you appreciate all of that so much more.
Olivia, as you're telling your story, it made me think of my own family. The 比较我古蒂那的，古尼古尼古尼要叫都我农样的呢，北京是新疆呢，搞北京朋友去北古只要的是嘛，北京新疆北莫拉去了北京西湖。And one thing that I noticed different the 古尼要听古尼 is that 他北尼要比好古尼一直 approve 古只有你要啊。thì
Yeah.
thầu bên này giao lo này giờ cũng giao cá của này nhưng hai đứa của thì có cũng xong một thọ bên này giao linh nhẹ right họ cũng giao cá của nhà hai theo chỉ ta lên đó là cũng những bảo họ different between của chỉ treat bên này giao theo của chỉ treat của nhà vì đó họ thì của nhà nó mà những giao tụi nhà lo theo theo của nhà chỉ ít tu và của chỉ ít tu lòng gạo của chỉ một thật thải tu lúc của chỉ mà yếu na họ bên này giao nó mà giao của chỉ tu lòng gạo á thì của chỉ tu một thật thải tu lúc theo tu một của tu have brother họ plan mà của chỉ theo mà yếu lo nên chỉ của theo bảo họ thì họ different của chỉ treat bên này giao trở lại cha compare của nhà trở lại cha so there is a big difference there cái của giao mới giao của chỉ một của nhà đào na and thằng đó yêu trường mê tí chị yêu chỉ bảo ai yêu hai cái đó yêu chỉ nữa bây giờ yêu chủ nhân gia thế nào and that's one thing that stuck with me until now and moving forward we can giao lưu đó của tụi khanh hay tới rồi của yêu và yêu của yêu là của chị chị của yêu của chị tụi kia xưa and I think that tụi tôi nhớ tới chuyện nào tụi tôi mua cái và mình là I have to be different
Yeah.
của chuyện gia cá của nhà chẳng hay được của theo ôi trai của yêu ba của tụi con nhiều lo này của tôi chẳng hay được của nhà thì có bộ bao giờ vì lý cha của họ ba nè vì đó họ thì cú chia cú chỉ qua đâu có sẽ từ tàu từ móc cú sẽ tàu này cú chỉ đi ở lên đó cú từ con nhà này, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we show love so differently now versus like the lao then too, you know? And so I think just Olika hai you ying ba you ying you yum you ying ba like the lao la or de ying mo ni okay key that she might you don't know how to help. Right? Because even like with my mom, like I know she went through so much pain and just so much that god damn, she's so fucking awesome for and patient for like just putting up with that shit, you know? It makes me so angry thinking about it, but I think just kind of like seeing her go through all of that, it just shows like how freaking amazing Hmong women are. To like whether you are Nihoni, Yao, Main, Da, or whatever, as long as you have like any type of Hmong in you, you have that with you. And I think just the ability to be that patient to deal with all of that bull crap, you know, it's yeah.
Yeah, I definitely do want to mention the, you know, like growing up and having so many siblings and having fun. Like we could play kickball without anybody else, right? Yeah. So I did really enjoy having so many siblings because we could have a little volleyball game, we could have like, you know, a soccer game. And you know, I definitely feel like my dad really did like having 7 sons, you know, and having so many like, you know, for them to have each other and stuff like that. And I felt like you know, like as the only girl, I did feel like protected by my brothers. So I think that was like really nice. And you know, I mean, I think like there was definitely, I mean, it's like, I mean, there's definitely going to be unfairness, you know. It's just like, again, like just me being in my own world sometimes, you know, being the only girl, like it's just kind of the narrative that I grew up with. Okay, so the next question, did people treat you differently growing up and how did that make you feel?
You know, for Kuna, I think I mentioned it to you guys as well, is that once like bao thì cụ chỉ muốn lo nè yao nó chỉ là automatically put this thì ô có vậy tụi nên nông nè lo nè yao, right, and then they expect thì yao you nông nè lo nè yao rồi chỉ you nè lo nè yao thế nào. And I even have my cụ tụi nè lao và mom to older sister joke thì you know you better watch your husband closely because nè yao tụi nè lo nè yao chỉ you got to watch carefully and muốn nè lo nè yao thế nào. So I think that Hanama kusate tell the land jokes it affects you. We don't have to you seeing money along the you know, and again yon the you share you are told you it's okay like you are told you just you know. So and hai on the relationship to kutsina we don't have to kumua brother and sister chứ chống là bây giờ thì cũng chỉ cho mua cái relationship nó cũng chỉ cũng chụp bỏ cũng bỏ tiền nhiều chỉ thì xem mà ước chiến đầu cái phong như rong nè. So vì họ thì cũng mua đợt cũng nhà kia sẽ bị một cầu chỉ lên đó.
Wow.
Thì xem mà bị bao tu xia là chỉ tại sao chụp bị cầu ý lên trên là nhiều nên trên nhiều mua tu tuần sai tu một cho lọ theo mua của tu have brother chỉ là chuyện gì cái bị cầu xa lên. Tell brother mong ya thì chỉ bị chống hẳn nè, you know, as you explain about your large family của trường sa thì bị mong nè bị chống bị soccer team lấy lại bị volleyball team lấy lại này, there's so many of us already. So yeah.
I think for me like Thái cũng share được cũng guilty of hai lo luga nông nghiệp yêu lo nghiệp yêu cho con cú family trong the head right, like my stepdad had 2 wives. I think I don't know if my dad, I don't know if his wife passed already and then he married my mom, or if he married my mom and then his first wife passed. And then both of my uncles, from my biological dad, had my oldest uncle had Nilani Yao, and then the middle one is 3 wives. And so I feel like that term, you have heard it. And I'm guilty of saying that. And I know the impact behind it. And that's why I don't say it anymore as a grown woman, because I do feel like it has this negative stigma to it. And and so it may be different for the men, but I think for me as either Hmong woman, I feel like the impacts on me growing up and still today, or just until my stepdad passed this year, um I feel like people are always like, because with stepdad sometimes you know,
Mhm.
and so I think for me it was more of like people asking me like, oh, how's your stepdad? Did he go and marry that third wife in Laos already?
Sure.
Or and I think for me, to be honest, because like your relationship with your dad, like I'm not close with my stepdad. And so when people associate that or ask me those questions, like if that's the first thing you ask me every time you see me, it does make me feel some sort of way because I don't want to be asked that. I don't know. Like I don't know his life. I don't have a relationship with him. And so when people ask me that, it made me really, really uncomfortable. And it happens a lot. Whether it's from my husband's side of the family or my uncles from my mom's side, it just makes you feel really uncomfortable that so
Right.
I think for me growing up as like a youth, I could care less. I don't think there was really any negative impact besides like just you see them going back and forth and how they treat your mom versus the other mom. And then you do kind of tend to grow resentment there. But once you get older, it's more of like people asking you those questions that I was just kind of like, God, like it's so embarrassing. Like it's like "Kapag di ko uning gumubala siya ng to and tunay no nung guli no na."
Mm.
And like I would tell my mom, like, it's embarrassing to me, mom. Like, I know you feel like I don't have this great relationship with him, but I also don't appreciate like people like him having this reputation that he did cause people like he built his own reputation, right? And so when people say those things, it's like a negative impact on me and
Mhm.
my siblings.
Mhm.
So
And I think, Olivia, you touch on something that is very crucial and important in the Hmong community is that Nuchiyaku individual reputation. It's the
yeah.
clan reputation. Thia ya
Mhm.
I họ chẳng được biết trong Hmong thia mi ca na mà thảo cũng chỉ tu chỉ nên Hmong là ya tiền chỉ I lần lần từ cũng chỉ bao na chỉ cũng tự chỉ introduce để cũng ya lần từ ha cũng để cũng ya thái xong cũng chỉ ya tụ nó sẽ right chỉ lấy bao để cũng chỉ ya lần từ là lấy bao để cũng chỉ muốn này là là chỉ mua là do lấy bao thì chỉ nên muốn xong non đầu bao nhiêu là chín đầu muốn này là chỉ muốn này là
Mhm.
chỉ mua lấy bao right bên Hmong and I think that's very important also to understand that the Big Hmong Ho clan reputation is very important and that's why likeเราที่เรียกที่non dễ gặp tàu trả vì đó họ thì bé là biến xã gặp bé tu tu tàu ít tu bao nhiêu rong tàu chắc chỉ nên rong thế lỡ là lấy xã gặp là tàu ít tu vào rong thế chắc
Yeah.
chỉ rong thế and that's why họ nó con it made me think of that so
Yeah. 居然喺咗個圖 A, um, I kind of like when people say, "Oh, I'm this person's daughter," I'm always like, "No, I'm not." Because it's kind of sad, right? Because my dad passed away when I was so young, and so yeah, like you do got to carry little babe, but he passed so long ago. We were all so young. When people say, they don't say, "Oh, these are this person's kid." They say your stepdad now.
right
And so I always have to, and I don't do it out of hate, but I do it out of like love for my dad. My
mm-hmm.
dad, like my biological dad, where like people say, "Oh, this is this person's daughter." I always want to correct and say, "No, I'm Shouching's daughter." You know,
Right and you are and
and
that's
yeah, and I think that's sad that people don't introduce you. I don't know. I mean, I get it's respect out of the stepdad because he raised you and he did all this stuff, but I think it's also a disrespect to my dad, because it's not his, so I don't know.
Yeah,
It's just
so
so
I
much.
like when so my dad is the only one of his brothers that have two wives, and I feel like in my mom's side, yeah, he's the only one, and on my dad's side, he's the only one. So it's kind of, I mean, and it's not like anyone said anything, And so I don't think I felt, any differently. I don't think people said anything to my brothers, but again, so I'm not really listening for those things. But I do remember like, and this is like outside of the family, but at my grandma, my mom's funeral, I had like my cousin's husband. So like there was this man that introduced his Niam Yau, and so then my cousin's husband, who's Mika, he was like, "Oh crap! Like that dude's like introducing his like he's got 2 wives," and I was like, "That's my dad," you know. like I was like, "Oh, that's my dad," you know. But I do appreciate like little stuff like that, and I don't know if my brothers also appreciate stuff like that, where I do feel like my dad me always introduced me and so like that's the kind of stuff that I think allows me to like love each of my parents for for their efforts and trying to kind of make all of this work. But growing up, I didn't really hear much. It was just kind of like the way that it was, maybe because my dad is so no one's gonna say nothing to my dad.
I have to give your dad a lot of credit. Going out taking 2 wives at the same time, it speaks a lot about his character and his commitment to entrepreneur. Họ tiền cho lý cú bỏ na, cháu muốn nhà lo này giàu nó mà lấy tend to go into ít tu sữa. Either muốn đâu nhà lo lấy muốn đâu tụi nhà giàu nhưng chỉ chụp bỏ là okay. So to see nhà lo này giàu okay nó lên tụi chỉ là that speaks a lot about tụi chỉ năng the thiên nữ chữ nữ chế năng thiên nữ entrepreneur lý cha.
Yeah, it's definitely it is different now, so I don't want to discount like what's different now, but growing up I did feel like I think my dad focused a lot, like my dad was a great father, and just like where he just really focused on his kids, and maybe that also allowed him to not have to deal with 2 women all the time, right? Like it was more like, I'm going to give everything to my kids, and then just make sure that my wives she and all that stuff. So
yeah. Gosh, like we're almost up on the hour. And there's so much more that we want to share. So let's just kind of dive into our parents and their relationship just a little bit before we call it a night here. But how did your mom handle your dad marrying a second mom? Ty, I think Callie and we can speak from a second mom lens, but I think for you, like, how did your mom handle that? I know you said earlier your mom did not agree.
No, so the kunia the kuchina manga how relationship is very dynamic because the kunia ma ye tu ni nyon joa sa je kuchi la kuchi ye tu nyon joa thia je nya lu shi han da na je ku tu phao to yu a do chen nang ku ye ji la je wa ku tu phao ha do ku chi ha tiaก็ยังมีหยวนจัวเทียก็ช่ามูอยู่เลยตุนชายว่ามุ่งเนี่ยมุ่งจีก็ตัวอยู่ว่าตุเผาตุนชายมันจะอยากกุนเนี่ยเจกุนเนี่ยตอนนี้กุนเนี่ยเปียนะเจกุนเนี่ยมูเตลอยเจเหยียดจีเลยจีเลยเดียวโอ้มองตัวยันดองมองมัวนั่นสินะเจ basically เจเลยจีเลยมัวกุนเนี่ยเท่ากุจีจีอยู่กุจีเจกุจีเทียกุนเนี่ยก็จีเลยไปวันนั่งเจมัวเป๊ะซะฮันเดเป็นเนี่ยยาวนะมากูจีหล่อเยาวินัยเจกูจียิ่งอ้วนหุ่นทองนะกูจีนี่แต่ท้าลงก็เขาไปขอกูจีมันเนี่ยพวกยิ่งมาเนี่ยยิ่งมันเนี่ยเขาเนี่ยยาวที่จริงก็ยิ่งโอเคตาลีที่อ๋อจริงก็แต่ท้าก็เป็นแต่ท้าลงก็เจว่าเป็นเนี่ยยาวที่ come into the picture เจว่าถ้าเป็นเนี่ยยาวมั่วมีหยวนแล้วนะเจกูจีว่าจะต้องใจกูจีที่เลยหายเจกูจีอยู่เนี่ยยาววิโรจน์เจมั่วมีหยวนแล้วนะเจว่า but even the kunia la kunia ji approve ha de ka ku ji yo tie even today kunia ji jeng ha tie tu mi yo e pe ni yao jiao lang de yao ku ji tu li dia I mean that's how I don't know that's her perspective and I think I guess ku yin tao nữ khó thế vì khó thì ni tu mi yun jo ni lo na ji ni tu lo da ku ji lu nang ye ku ji lu nang tu jong la na ji u ta ni tao nữ na ji ni tao ni sai de u ja ku ji chong o pe tao nữ thia na ji ni yin ji wa ni yin ji approve de shi ma vi ro khó thì ni ji more any other choice yeah I think Olivia or Gali you alluded to it yeah vì Japan nia wa jong ya ku nian generation de la ma la wa là sủ mua tụt chỉ nhau trong đó nè, they're willing to make sacrifice of their happiness so that là tàu lúc bây giờ là một chỉ là chỉ tụi con chùa là chỉ tụi con trâu. So I think that's what my mom sacrificed her happiness for that, and also for big y'all, for big cụ thia của y'all brother and sisters and them too. So you hai the one ni yao ni che cụ ni yi chi approve. Trở là nhau ok là cụ ni yên yên cụ yên chỉ bỏ tiền cái mua good relationship, cái chuyện là nhau vì đó họ cụ chỉ dùng cái là ok xí nè. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, like, of course, like, 同的疫情也有一起报道起, but I mean, just kind of like, God, I feel like the good that past that I was 5. Like we pop mom like jump on talo or like Tony mucha ball you ain't born. I mean, because I was the youngest, so she took me everywhere. So we remember ninja monk ta monk ball and stuff, and then all out of sudden out of nowhere, like she married my stepdad, and I'm sure my stepmom did not approve or hated it. Hence why like there was so much drama in my family as we grew older. But as kids, you just don't really know. So I'm sure that there were some, things that happened that kind of resulted in this tension in our family. But I just don't know what they were. And honestly, I don't. I mean, as a woman, I don't approve of my husband marrying a second wife either. So I don't blame all the first wives to have that feeling and towards the second woman or the husband or the situation. So yeah.
Yeah, and my mom is named Niam Yau too, and I'm pretty sure my Niam Hlob did not approve of that either. I do remember my mom said, I don't think it was when my mom came to the house, but I know that like my mom did say that sometimes my Niam Hlob will want to fight my mom, and my mom would have to be like up for it too. But my mom's short, so she probably would have gotten beat up anyways. But I think it's just kind of like of course you're pissed, but you thought ooh, and then it's just kind of the way it was too. And I know my brother has told me, but I have not heard the story of how my dad married my Niam Hlob, so I don't want to share something that I don't know for sure for her firsthand. But yeah, that's kind of how it happened. Yeah. Let's see. Were there any tension between you and your dad, or your dad and any of the siblings, because of the way that your father has treated the moms?
The cú chê qua cú mà cú tu baby theo Olivia. All of the 15, I'm the baby as well. And cú lo đồ lúc xí hở qua yêu chỉ hai lý cha chê giờ yêu chỉ yêu để chỉ yêu là yêu shut up, yêu chỉ hai chỉ liao, right? You chỉ challenge new hard decision, you chỉ challenge new hard opinion, you hai chỉ tao để có chỉ yêu na chỉ, có tóm lòng bé hai thế này. So everything cụ chỉ Oli cha chỉ cụ chỉ Oli cụ chỉ xin nhà sẽ chỉ cụ là cụ cho tí lâu là mỗi bao niệm nhỏ ta giờ là những một nhỏ là cho cụ thế cụ tí lâu lo kia cụ ý xong là ứng ra cụ chỉ người nhỏ sẽ chỉ cụ chỉ những Oli cụ chỉ lúc sẽ xả sẽ. So cụ những bỏ cụ chỉ go back and forth trong này giao là đó bé. And I think that he did the best that he can. Cụ nhà chỉ những do tu và cụ chỉ mua yếu tàu lò thế thì mà chỉ要读半年我估计你也录适合他是那 you fall in love with you wanna ya 我俾你要呢只还要读到那只估计要冇他照估计要热估计哈哈冇估计都没有呢估计贴里有了 so nhưng da估计贴估呢只yên ya估ta估还 earlier yên chỉ chung mua relationship vì họ只估计mua bé chỉ chung nè chỉ估计lo估计要tu nên và这更贴这能贴估计 tend to more 我这绕子是呢也 most of the time 因只鸟和谁因只我有 to 碰一个呀这话你应该好用贴应该好集中贴but that's a little bit about 估贴估计 how relationship wise so
yeah I think for me it's so funny you say that my stepdad so my dad kutsima my biological dad my stepdad and so I felt like they were always really like unfortunately nobody took over any of their skills but out of the like however many sons they have. But they, like you said, they were always, I think if anything about my stepdad, even though I don't think that he was a really good father or husband, I think that he did do the best that he could with how his personality is. I think when we were little, của hai tiền nữ yên lúc của thế thầu yêu trình như mà yêu cho hai tiền thầu nữ muốn nhẹ đâu nữ cho là nữ yên muốn nhẹ đâu yêu thế. um but I think like like mama, I just kuching choni thing ye choni lo lu zhong sana, like for me, even growing up, like I would go into debt for him if that's what he needed me to, because money can be earned, debt can be paid, or bankruptcy can be filed, right? But the love and it's something you cherish forever. And so for me, I feel like my relationship with him, it wasn't the best, but I must also say that I also didn't try, because of the resentment that I have. And so a lot of it I do blame myself, but I also don't regret it either, because I feel like the you lúc chỉ tao yêu ý à li e khó yêu xa này à, like even though cái sao tao lo lu zhong yu yong yi si lo nong go too much tao yêu na, so like after he passed, a lot of reflecting happened, right, of just like, man, like I didn't even really shed a tear because there was no relation. I shed a tear for my younger siblings because he did have a really good relationship with them. Right before he became unmobile, he spent most of his time with my mom because my stepmom had passed her. She wasn't mobile, so my dad was always with my mom farming and stuff. And my younger siblings, they were still young and so what they like younger war and stuff. So I was really glad that my dad actually got to build this lasting relationship with them, so they at least have good memories of him and with him. And so I was more shedding tears for them because they lost someone that tried to build that relationship with them, whereas for me, I didn't have a good relationship with him. But I do remember him là yên lưu you li là lưu tao thế mà cho khỏi cái hai thọ e like when I had Bell's palsy ni chuộc luôn chơi mua thế, just little things like that where they don't show you the way that you want to, and they still do things to piss you off to where you resent them, but because you yên do là tụi mình nhiều chơi là tứ là chỉ trong hai tay you chỉ do thế này nhở cho khỏi là yên do you nhiều là thế chơi, so there's a lot of things that go into it. But I do remember one time I've never yelled at him. I have never talked, like challenged him. It was really just of like, okay, dad's here, hi, bye kind of thing. But this one time I do remember it was like I must have been like freshman year in college where there was just some drama with my mom, and I was just so livid because no one was doing anything. And I do remember yelling at him that one time. Well, raising my voice. I didn't yell. I raised my voice. That one time of being really firm, like, if you don't start doing this, then you need to let me know so I can go find someone who can help my mom, because this is messed up what your children are doing. And I'm not okay with it. And I will not stand by to see my mom being hurt. I'm tired of hearing her cry every night. You need to do something about it. You are her husband. So that was the only time I've ever said anything like that to him. Because, I was just so fed up with it. But other than that, like, he did what he could with how Donna, so I
really, and as you're sharing your story, Kuching society, especially the Pepe to not generation, don't expect illusion from them.
I know, it's sad. I know.
Like basically, monkey see what monkey do. So one thing we noticed was, if I get lucky, and that's already, there's plenty there already. But to hear the word from them, it's you're gonna set yourself up for failing, because they're not gonna say it. But then they will say it in many ways. Make sure go touch a playa. Make sure you try that you le more tao li le what tao. right? Yeah, yeah, but I got the money to the job in your land, the motor car here. So that's a little gesture there,
Yeah.
and you know, and to me, we expect that กับคุณเนี่ยที่กูจีให้รอเดี๋ยวกูลูกก็แล้วอย่าเดียวอย่าเลยเป็นหนูหายไปจะไม่หนัวใช่ไหม because that generation you don't
Yeah.
get that they don't get it too so
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you bring up a really good point there because oli go ahead kulima kuchin chanya kuchin chanya lalu jong tia lalu like hadi lu yunaya. I like for my dad, I know I wasn't it's wishful thinking. It's hope like right because like you can clearly see that he can't even do it to his own children. So how can he ever do it to you, right? And so there's that. But I think like you bring a good point about them not doing that, but that doesn't mean they can't change.
right
Because, you know, if we want to see that, then we have to start initiating those types of conversations or like little gestures of like, you know, mom, I love you. And and for me, even my mom, like I know she loves me, but she just never says it because she's not used to it.
right
And so it just wasn't until like recently where she starts to say I love you because you know she's been hospitalized a couple times and so you know she's always like oh kuluka me right and so now it's different whereas before when right like she was very independent she just go she just needs to make a living but now that she's not as mobile and her health condition isn't so great. I'm sure she's had a lot of time to like just like sit back and reflect. But she says it more now than before, and I think it's slowly changing. It. I don't think that you know it's too late for us if your parents are still alive and let's say hi to Yuna, right? Because you have to teach them. I mean, Callie knows this. She can share her story of how she's doing that with her parents, but I think it has to start from us. You know.
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. I think at some point I just started telling my parents I love them, and then when I leave, like I hug them, you know, like whether they hug me back or not, you know. But I think that really just came from a place of like, you know, I don't know, like because y'all. And so for me, it's just like I don't know anything could happen, you know. And so if I'm with them, like I want them to at least, you know, when we part, like for them to feel that for me. As far as like tension for growing up, I mean, I feel like so much of these questions, like I'm just in my own world because of my own like stuff that I grew up with. But I think for me, the tension was more like not like Yao, but like boys and girls, you know, because I feel like all my brothers knew that my dad favored boys. That was like very apparent. And so growing up, that was more like my thing of just always feeling like you're just never enough because you and he has 7 sons, and so it was always this complex of like, gosh, like I could be the perfect son, but you're not a son, right? You're a daughter. And so it was like everything that I did, you know, even though like I was pretty smart in school and you know I did all the stuff I felt like I needed to do, like you just can never meet that because you're not a son. So but that's a whole nother conversation. But as far as like my dad and my siblings, I mean, I do sense that like my brothers, like my half brothers from Niam Hlob, like I do sense that like blame what you know, for their mom and you know the unfairness that they felt for my dad. And you know, I mean, I think for that, what I love about what they've done is just that I feel like they do, and they're not perfect husbands, but I do feel like wives, you know, try their best despite again like being and my dad is not one to be like you know, I love you guys and stuff. And so but I think I'm just proud of my brothers to be able to see that, you know, the wives, you know, like wives you know, like they do try, and I do see that for them, and so I'm really glad. And you know, I think growing up, just like I just always knew that, like, because my dad always said it, right? It's just like you know, you know, which sometimes is really hard because I feel like even now when I go back home and like now that I don't have a husband, right, it's just like you know, like I told Olivia, like, get your PhD or, you know, find a husband. And sometimes just like, I'm just never enough. Like, I feel like that's my complex of just like, you feel like you're just never enough, right? Because it's like, you do more Z, you do more PhD. And so
And
dealing with,
Gabriel, you are absolutely right. I think 俾芒字已經幫助個老路個係那個呢，
Yeah.
有頭個字淨係歌，你個字淨係歌，有頭個字只係歌了，那些對就多了，個字你是多
yeah,
，right?
Mhm.
And the 可能嘛，啲只係 between relationship between 字天才呢，I think 佢啲嚟應一樣。
yeah,
頭個我啲開始用嗰隻佢啲只係歌嘅嚟應只做佢歌呢，嚟啲你只個我歌呢，嚟有啲頭個我開始只用嗰隻佢啲都。 lần họ cho lấy tôi chỉ có lớn là chỉ thằng đó là chuyện khi có là thiết chuyện và tôi chỉ có thiết tuân thủ có and I think họ có hay có it's one of the things that bên mong và tụ chịu bự là ya để bên họ culture là ya right.
Mhm.
yeah. And I definitely see that because even my kids playing soccer, you know, like you ma, you know, and I did my daughter recently was like, Mom, why are you so hard on me and Mason? And I was like, I became my dad because I was like, it's because I care about you. If I didn't care, if you didn't score any goals, I wouldn't say anything, right? I would just be like, whatever. But
Yeah.
we do become our parents.
Right, and cú hai đôi này cú chỉ tao chỉ tu nhà lấy tu chỉ là tiền lấy chỉ khéo lấy cho mình nhỏ na, là do tiền lấy chỉ sát tao rong đó lấy cho mình nhỏ na, cú chỉ tao chỉ tu nhà tu chỉ rong lên đó lấy. All of the parents that I met, they want the best for their kids. Even me, I want the best for my kids, and I think that when my kids grow up, they also will want the best for their kids as well. So.
Yeah, I agree. Gosh, there's just so much I want to go into, but we are already 15 minutes over. So I don't know, Callie, if there's anything you want to add or if there's any like screaming comments that we just want to highlight. I know there's been lots of engagement in the comment section. I promise I'm not ignoring you guys. I know Callie's like her eyes are going over there. My eyes are going over there. We're reading what you guys are saying too. But we just kind of have to keep the conversation going. So thank you guys.
I just want to say one thing before we go, and I mentioned this to Gauli as well, is that 頭俾殺咗年攞年休嘛，邊殺咗學皮先啊 right? But I think there are successful 年攞年休 family out there. We just don't know about it.
Yeah.
And I think, and the reason I say that is because 古包只有一種的是嘛，古包跟 family 或者冇年攞年休นะ。It's a money long like Jaminua is very successful. Ka bachelor degree, master's degree, PhD, and like and I hope that we get someone in that family to talk about here we have the stigma of it's always how you know you do have to pay and there are successful stories out there too. And I'm not saying that I'm condoning that practice. It's not up to me to tell you what you should do or for them to tell me what I should do. But I'm just saying that Olivia, this is common. This is not just me. If you really talk about it, it's the most of us are going through very similar or similar journey. And I that's one thing that I wanted to be with you guys and also the viewer and the people that listening is that even though it may seem like it's bad, but there are successful story out there. They have Yanali out that is very successful. So
yeah. And again, this is just the beginning of the conversation, you guys. I hope that you guys are taking this and using this as a what do they call it? Like a side conversation. What do you, Callie? Where am I looking for?
Starter?
Yes, something like that. With your family and your friends and share your experience, your frustration, your happiness of your family. Because there's no reason for us to hold on to all of this hate in us. I know I still have a lot of work to do through my own experiences of with my family. I'm continuing to work on it every day, and I love that we're having this conversation. And I share it not from a place of hate, but a place of wanting to heal for myself. And hopefully it inspires and opens up the conversation for you guys to have with your own self, your family, and reflect on, your own experiences.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think being born into this kind of situations, there's definitely a lot of things that you have to deal with, you know, even if the situation is like maybe a little bit better than others. I think there's still a lot. And I think like one of the piece that I found for myself, and I think that's the thing that we all have to like find, we're not going to get the closure that we need from our parents, right? So we have to almost like try to like find that peace for ourselves. And I think that when I think about each of my parents and just recognizing that like yeah, they did the best that they could, and like when I look at my parents as not as parents but as human beings, I do feel like lagi mo like it's okay to share, you know, like I know my Niam Law, like, you know, there's stuff that I wish for her, you know, that I wish she can have. There's stuff that I wish my dad can have, you know, as I'm sure he didn't realize that him being in this situation has done, you know, and so I'm sure there's a lot of things that he would want to change. And then for my mom as well, right, coming in as Niam Yau, you know, there's just things that with the culture and the things that they played out, and you know, it's part of our culture too. So it's like that complex thing where it's like it's a beautiful thing, but it's also a really hard thing, and it's not it's not like it was very easy, but in it, you know, you learn to love, like, you know, you learn to love despite frustrations. You learn to love despite seeing a lot of problems and jealousy and unfairness and things like that. And so I'm really like grateful, you know, to have had this experience. And I'm also grateful to, you know, have my brothers, and you know, again, like they're brothers, right? And so our relationship is not like it's not like I'm calling Itumoy, or, you know, because I have never had that experience of a sister. So I don't have anything to compare to, but I feel like my brothers are all I know. And it's the little things that they do or say that makes me like recognize that love who you, kind of like how my parents love, right? It's just like the small things that you have to appreciate, that, you know, like that's their way of showing love. And so real sometimes too tall, y'all. But definitely it's yeah, like Olivia says, hopefully you guys can take this and just know that, you know, we're all, you know, we've been in this situation, we're all dealing with it, we're all trying to heal from it, whether we are, you know, like the oldest, youngest, you know, and that hopefully you can be able to find people that you can, you know, learn to heal and just gain some perspective for this. And so thank you everyone for joining us tonight and for sending stars. We appreciate those stars. They help to keep our show going. And of course, here at All That Talk, we believe that conversations drive change, and change starts with you. We'll see y'all next week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.